Hello, everyone. This is Kim Huggins from ALULA. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about a really business critical issue right now, digital transformation. Today, I am fortunate enough to be joined by James Fairweather, who's the Senior Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at Pitney Bowes. And we're going to be talking about the topic of digital transformation and how organizations are combining people, processes, and technology to really transform their business. James, I'd like to just ask you to tell us a little bit about Pitney Bowes and also your role there, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So Pitney Bowes is a global e-commerce service provider. It's a company that is 99 years old, about to celebrate its 100th birthday in April of 2020. And it's a company that has been aggressively transforming its products, services, and solutions, a digital transformation of those offerings to meet new client demands and move into markets that are experiencing growth. My role at Pitney Bowes is in product development, and all the products and services that we offer to clients are developed by engineers and data scientists and innovation leaders in my teams. So we're on the front end providing new value and new product solutions for our company to clients.
That's great. Thanks, James. And thanks for making the time to be with us today. I know you have some great information to share, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You know, it's really amazing how much money is being spent on digital transformation today. Look at these numbers, $1.25 trillion projected for 2019 and almost $2 trillion going into 2022. Why do you think companies are making this level of investment in digital transformation?
Those numbers are staggering. I think
they really are.
Yeah, I mean trillion. I think ultimately it's an investment in clients and in an ability to most effectively carry on a business and service relationship with their clients. But the world has shifted so much, and many products, many services today are not one-time purchases. They're a journey with a company, and to kind of conduct that journey, you kind of have to have this digital capability and ability to meet your clients, where and when they want to meet with you, and support their journey and ensure they're getting value from your solutions and get that feedback if they're not, so you can enrich and enhance your solution accordingly. It's become a big feedback process. So I think people, leaders are recognizing the need for that feedback from clients and that ability to connect to them on all of the channels that are available today, and they're making these investments as a result.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we are, as we're out in the market and we're talking to our clients and at conferences, I mean, this topic is a very hot topic, and it's just really being discussed everywhere. But I find it interesting that there still seems to be a lack of clarity or definition around what digital transformation really is. So I'd like to spend a few minutes just talking about, from your perspective, as you think about traditional IT, truly digital organizations, and then those organizations that are maybe somewhere in between those two, kind of what they look like. So with traditional IT, those are typically the technology that's being implemented is more mature and proven. IT is really, taking the lead role in the organization to optimize the processes and roll out the technology, more, the legacy businesses, legacy business models. But tell us a little bit what you think the difference between digital transformation, digital companies, and the traditional IT company is. Can we go to the next slide? Go ahead,
Yeah,
James. Do you want to comment on digital?
Sure. So the biggest difference I see in kind of a traditional company, I don't want to call legacy sort of sounds pejorative, but legacy is so important to all of us. It's what's in many companies, paying the bills and driving a lot of the earnings. But in a company that has had a sort of standard product offering set, the product offering isn't necessarily tightly connected to or driven by a digital experience for the client. It can somewhat stand alone. And in a traditional organization, your IT systems, which are kind of handling everything from when you're about to receive cash on back to the actual collection of that cash, those systems stand apart and are distinct from the service or product offering you're providing to clients. In today's world, though, we see a lot of new purely digital businesses emerging. These businesses, they have no traditions, and they are starting right at the ground floor, building the relationships with clients, designing the product and service, designing the end-to-end experience you will have around all of the digital touch points. And digital touch points can be kind of traditional communication paths that we talk about, traditional text and email and websites, but it can also be things like IoT and this data coming back from the device or the solution to better inform the company on its use and how you're getting value from it. And these digitally native companies are constantly using new technology. They're constantly evolving their technology footprint, and the real North Star they have is that client experience. They're constantly focused on the client experience and enhancing it. And so their systems, their IT systems, really evolve in direct response to the client. In that traditional footprint, that may not be the case. The IT systems may have been stood up without the client in mind. They may have been there just to serve a purpose, like capacity planning for manufacturing or workforce planning for the internal teams. They may have no connection at all to the client experience. In the digital natives, I think everything getting put into the IT environment is really very client-centric.
Yeah, thanks. That's some great points. And then the digitally enhanced business, I think this is where we would say probably the majority of our clients are. They're somewhere in between. They know that they have to become more digital, and they're on their own journey around doing that. And it really does look and feel different, right? Much more, being owned by the C-suite, a lot more cross-functional partnership to execute, and as you mentioned, really being driven by what the customer needs and wants. Do you have any other thoughts around just these digitally enhanced businesses and some of the challenges that they're experiencing? I'm sure Pitney Bowes would fall into this as well, right? And on your own journey to becoming, a more digital company. Yes,
for sure. Pitney's clearly in the digitally enhanced space. I think it's actually very. It's a great space to be in. You've got a core set of products that are profitable. You've got great client relationships, and what you've recognized is that those pure digital businesses have built this communications path that you may not be able to take advantage of, and they're able to enhance their value more effectively because of that feedback that they're getting. And so in many companies, I think this is where the digital transformation investment is being made. It's how do we reorient systems that may not have had a client orientation and really drive them around the client. And that's been the spirit of our digital transformation. It's different from traditional IT projects. Typical IT transformation projects don't necessarily gear around client experience. But when you do make that the North Star of the project, which we have and have had great result of those efforts, you come out with programs and initiatives that move you more to that sort of pure digital space, with the benefit, of course, of all the existing products and services that you offer today immediately are getting better because they're benefiting from the feedback and they're benefiting from that increased dialogue with client. So I do think a lot of companies, this is probably where most of that 1.2 to 1.9 trillion is going. It's taking companies, right? It's taking companies that may not have had a digital relationship and a digital enhancement strategy for their services. And how do you plug in that kind of, the right technology, the right cultural behaviors, the right skills and talents to enhance what you're already probably doing really well, but really get it, fit for the, this current time when it's a competitive necessity to have this kind of capability in your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Some great points there. And, kind of the next, and leading into the next thing I wanted to talk about was when companies are rolling out a digital transformation strategy, there seems to be a lot of different spaces that they have to focus on, right? So obviously there's the strategy itself, being driven by the client, kind of defining what that strategy is and figuring out the execution plan for it. There's the whole piece around just, looking at your current IT infrastructure and technology solutions to decide, how you plan for executing. And then there's the whole, what are those solutions going to be, right? Do they even exist now? Or, how do you go about assessing and finding the technology to support your strategy? And then the other piece that you mentioned is the whole culture piece. There's so many parts to that, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail later, but, just really focused on, getting the culture of the organization to embrace digital and to shift enough from, the legacy culture to being a culture that has some key qualities in it that are really going to help to execute your digital strategy. What do you think about these focus areas? Are there others that you would add? What are some of the challenges that companies experience as they're looking at all these different components?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with, that graphic at the very center where the gear is getting digitized. It's actually very, very appropriate in terms of how this feels. And so maybe first I'd point to the digital culture area where it is important in this transformation process to find ways to celebrate the entire organization, both what you've been, the people that are part of the organization, especially if you're in that, partly digital, partly traditional organization. You really need to bring everybody along, and finding ways to get everyone to contribute to this digital transformation is very critical. It's very easy to, quickly move to new things and not necessarily think about how the institutional knowledge that you have can inform what it is you should be doing with your digital capability. Take some time and patience, very good listening skills of leadership to really extract that and make that part of the journey. The other component is sort of this dimension of grit and mission. I'm not sure if mission is sort of a whole band on the outside of this circle or not, but these are not easy things to do. Digital transformation in general, one of the hardest things you're going to do in your firm, and making sure everybody feels and is aligned to the purpose and the goal is what's going to give people the resilience and the grit needed to push through and drive the change, build the systems make the transformation happen. And so I would urge every leader listening to this to really think about that mission and make sure it's something that you feel people can really internalize and feel, as opposed to just a set of words. It really has to become something that everyone will drive and motivate themselves around.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point. That is such a critical piece, right? And people really understanding the why and getting aligned around that.
Yes.
So as we talk to our clients and are out in the market, we see two barriers, and I think we touched on these a little bit, but I would like to spend some more time talking to them that really seem to be impacting digital transformation success. One is strategy execution. I mean, it's just amazing to me how many companies still are just not really good at executing strategy. And we were just talking about, all of the time and resources that are spent on the development of strategy, on assessing, the internal infrastructure, on, figuring out the technology product that needs to be purchased and invested in. But then when it comes to the execution, organizations still seem to fall short. I was speaking at a pharma conference not too long ago, and there's probably 300 people in the room, and we were talking about this topic, and I asked the audience, just by a show of hands, how many felt that their companies were above average at executing strategy, and one person raised their hand. There's something there. It's still a challenge, and we can talk a little bit more about that. And then the other piece that you were just mentioning too is this whole culture piece. And I think a lot of times organizations overlook the importance of this when executing strategy in general, but particularly with their digital transformation strategies. And so, let's go into these a little bit in a little bit more detail. As I just mentioned on strategy execution, there's still a large number of companies that feel as though they're not really maximizing their execution, and that their digital transformation is floundering, and then ultimately, they're not going to get those business results that they're looking for. And, on the next slide, these are some of the common things that we hear around why people feel their strategy is not working as well. And then you mentioned the word alignment earlier, and that certainly is something that comes up a lot, right? That leaders aren't fully aligned, and therefore the organization isn't aligned, and that may tie back to the mission piece that you were talking about, right? And that importance of making sure that everybody is clear on what the mission is and then aligned around that. And there's often just not a good plan in place. That, there's so much going on in organizations right now. And when we're talking about digital transformation, but there's so much change and transformation going on across organizations, right? Digital transformation just being one piece. And so I think leaders and employees often are just, unclear, are not well prepared for how to manage all of these things that are happening at the same time, how to prioritize. And then they're not really clear on what is expected, what those critical behaviors are that are needed at all levels of the organization to ensure that the transformation actually happens. And the culture piece, again, are there things that you've observed or experienced, either some of the ones that I have listed here or others that you feel really are impacting strategy execution related to digital?
Yeah, there's a few others, but I'll sort of frame them in the what can avoid them as opposed to what they are. I think sometimes the objectives that are laid out for what we expect a very large group of people to do are too large, and they don't have enough checkpoints along the way to kind of celebrate success and regroup. And I think breaking down the transformation into achievable steps, and then making everybody huddle up at certain points along the journey when we're, achieving a milestone, to do a couple of things. One, make sure you're celebrating the milestone and the progress and what has been achieved. We were very purposeful at Pitney Bowes at trying to get, in the case of software systems we were building to support our digital transformation, getting those systems, live and handling some client use cases as quickly as possible was important. We didn't want the team to just sort of disappear into a room for a couple of years and come out with a new digital platform. We wanted to start getting it, operational and tested, not just to avoid the technical risk, but also to give the team the encouragement that we were making progress and clients were going to start seeing the value.
Yeah.
I think that's important, is to have those huddles. The other important reason to have them is you don't know what the whole path is going to look like. You may think you do, but you're going to need to reorient yourself based on what you learn, how long things take, the feedback you're starting to get from clients. And if you don't provide the opportunity for that reorientation and the dialogue around it, you can kind of build your way into the wrong land. So, having those checkpoints to reorient yourself, I think is also very important. And then the third is, we hear a lot in sort of talent reviews about people being too tactical. And again, that's sort of said sometimes in a disparaging way. This is where the beauty of organizations come in. You have people with skills in all areas. You may have the greatest strategy in the world, but if you don't have people that can execute the tactics to achieve your strategy, you're not going to get there. So ensuring you put the right people in the right roles and you really respect every role that's being played on the team and celebrate it is critically important. Get your tacticians to really execute and get them aligned. You'll have a lot more success.
Yeah, some great points, and I really appreciate what you were saying around the checkpoints and kind of going back and realigning, sharing what you're learning, making adjustments. I think that's really, really important. We often see, in large projects like this, there's alignment that happens at a very high level early on in the project, but that, then doesn't continue throughout the project. And so once the strategy gets to execution phase and people are saying, wait, it's not what I was expecting was going to happen, or there's confusion, and the realignment needs to happen. So I think that
it's amazing, that ability to allow for that realignment. It's in software development, the industry's moved to this agile development methodology many years ago, sort of breaking work down into achievable sprints. And you can actually run your whole organization that way, and it can go well beyond just software development. And the greatest part about it is this idea of a retrospective, where you kind of reflect back on what's just happened and did it meet plans, and how should the plans have been adjusted, or how could they be improved before you go out and make the same mistakes again. That's a great, it's a great practice to incorporate in as much of this work as possible.
Yeah. When we're working with our clients, we often introduce them to our framework called Decom. And I know you're familiar with this, James, from your interactions with us, but just a little bit of history about Decom. We actually created this framework a few years ago when one of our clients came to us asking us to help them figure out what other companies were doing to get a sustainable level of top quartile performance. And so we went out and we did some research across industries, and we found that those companies had 4 critical components in place that they were leveraging consistently across the organization. And those were, direction, competence, opportunity, and motivation. And this, I think, is just really applies for companies that are going through transformation, particularly digital transformation. And the first piece, clear direction, is some of the things that you've talked about relating to mission and helping people understand the why. And then, competence is, not only do people have the knowledge and skills, but are they really feeling like they're prepared and ready to work differently than they have in the past? And that, do they really understand, from a business standpoint, why this is important and how this impacts the success of the business and the bottom line? And then the O is around, do people have the resources and tools to do what they need to work differently? And basically what we found is that if leaders and employees don't have clear direction, if they don't have knowledge and skills, if they don't have the resources and tools, frankly, they just can't execute digital transformation. But the motivation piece then is, am I feeling really engaged? Am I excited? Am I getting reinforced for working in new ways? Celebrating successes, you mentioned, is that a part of the new way of working? And without those types of things, people just don't have the, motivation, and they're not going to execute digital strategy in the way that is needed. So what are your thoughts around just this framework, and how have you seen the components, whether it's been this framework itself or just the components, help companies with digital transformation?
Yeah, I think these are essential components for a digital transformation. When we started ours, I was not familiar with this framework. It would have been helpful. We got some of these things right. Some of them we had to kind of tune along the way. I'd start with competence. One of the early elements of our digital transformation, it's kind of a combination of competence and direction. We set out to create a technology strategy as an organization that would define the 10 or so technologies we thought would be required for us to both digitally transform and enhance our products and services and capabilities for clients. We didn't have a perfect business strategy at this time, but we understood these to be critically important technology sets, and that direction came from our strategy document, and the competence came when we asked all of our 1,200 innovators to kind of swear allegiance to one of the 10 technical skills. So everybody had to pick one of those and get really smart about it. And we built curriculum to learn. And over the course of about a year, all of our innovators did coursework in this competence area that they picked that was led by somebody that was, more than a few pages ahead of them in the book. But it allowed a couple things to happen. It brought the organization together. We had been a collection of mini acquisitions. We had a lot of people meeting each other for the first time because they were aligning around a knowledge or skill that they wanted to get smart at, and this might run across 5, 6, 8 different geographies. So we were building a network, a fabric that was different than the one we had before, and people felt empowered to learn and grow their skills in a way I think that was refreshing to them. In some ways, I think it sort of instigated this idea that they had opportunity, that working on the products and services and solutions that they had been working on, while critically important, wasn't the only thing they could do. And then motivation, I think, comes in a bit in what I was describing as mission on that prior chart. We had to get everyone truly engaged and committed to this transformation effort. And in some ways, you have to tell them what the future will look like without this transformation effort, which is that could be challenging picture for some companies with, without a new set of digitally enabled offerings, that the market segments they could be in are in decline. It can also be a much brighter image of, we're going to move this company and the markets we serve to a mix of markets that are in growth. Growth is good for everyone. It's career expanding. If you will get new and relevant skills, you'll have an opportunity to take on responsibilities you didn't have before. These tended to be conversations with our middle managers to get them to sort of take on the challenge. And then when we had middle management really well aligned, that first line and middle line managers, they really are so powerful because they're talking to teams every single day. And when they took willingness and accountability to convey the direction that we had, the competencies we wanted to build, and the opportunity this presented to people, it became a motivating force in the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. That's really good. Great feedback. And I love what you shared about having people kind of pick that area that they wanted to focus on, and then providing them with the support to do it, to build their confidence around that. Some great examples there. Thanks.
Yeah. And when you do that, I'm sorry to cut you off. When you do that, they really do feel like you're investing in them. And ultimately, if somebody feels like a company is interested in their career and their progression, they'll do a lot to help help with the mission. So.
Yeah, definitely. So let's transition a little bit and talk more about culture, because this is the other barrier that we mentioned earlier, and many organizations still identify cultural issues as a hurdle to their digital transformation. When we define culture at ALULA, we define it as a pattern of behaviors, and those behaviors have been either reinforced or discouraged by people, systems, processes over time. And, when we think about digital transformation, clearly there are some behaviors that reside in the organization that need to stop in some cases, and there are also a lot of behaviors that reside in the organization that you want to continue. And then there are new behaviors, aligned to this new way of working that need to be developed. And so, thinking about digital culture and some of the key qualities that exist in organizations that have this type of supportive culture. We've identified 6. And on the right, the foundational qualities are what we would really say are table stakes, right? In order to truly be, a digital company or move towards being more of a digital company, you have to have things in place like innovation, collaboration, and you mentioned agility. Certainly that has to occur, and organizations have to be willing to, just think and act differently. And then on the other side, those things that we have found to be key qualities that can help to really accelerate digital culture are, customer centricity. And, we talked about that early on, just in terms of that's often what is driving companies to make the investment in digital transformation. But, we continue to see and hear about this across industries, just this real focus on the customer and, and empathy that maybe hasn't existed before, that I think is just really interesting. And then there's courage, right? And, as you said earlier, this is hard work. Digital transformation is difficult and challenging, and it takes courage really at all levels of the organization for people to really step up and trust in maybe technologies that haven't existed before, trust in new skills that are needed in the organization and have maybe a different level of transparency around data that didn't exist before. And then there's the data acumen piece, and that can encompass a lot of different things, but obviously data is just so critical today, and organizations are really kind of at different points in their own journey about how they leverage data, use data to drive decisions, share more data with customers and internally within the organization. So I would love to hear, let's start with the foundational side and just talk about, your feelings about these and how you see these maybe being described a little bit differently in a digital culture than in a more traditional culture.
Sure. It's challenging because they are so intertwined in a company going through transformation. The innovation is at sort of at the core. I mean, it's the core of what I do, Chief Innovation Officer. This idea, and we think about innovation in a couple of categories. We think about technology innovation. We think about business innovation. We think about process innovation. And technology innovation may be the first thing that comes to mind. Like what new technology capabilities can you bring to enhance products and services? But honestly, business model innovation and process innovation are as important to a digitally transformed company as pure technology. It's transforming client experience processes through innovation and rethinking what it means to have an interaction with a client and to engage them. It's a very powerful dimension, and it runs across your organization. It's well outside your engineering team. It runs to literally every part of the organization can participate in that kind of innovation. And then business model innovation, equally as important as more and more pure products move to services that are driving outcomes for your clients. And really what they're seeking from you is to create a specific outcome as opposed to give them a product that they're going to integrate and figure out how to use. You have to think through the business model differently and innovate with them on even how you both will get value, how you'll get value for providing the service and how they'll get value from the service. It leads to a lot of model innovation. Collaboration for Pitney has been key. We have an organization, as you described. We have functional groups, and more and more what represents a great digitally enabled and digitally successful team is when no one knows what organization they're from, they're just aligned around the client problem, and they have that client centricity, and they're working seamlessly with external partners, internally within the teams, and with the client to deliver value. And they're doing that obviously with agility. And I want to go back to the point I was making earlier. Agility isn't necessarily equal to kind of pure speed. I think of agility as the ability to reorient quickly in the right direction. In addition to pure speed, it involves a vector of direction and being able to get yourself to point to that direction as quickly as possible. I think organizations that can shift their direction in a controlled but rapid way are very powerful. And agility in that sense, I think, is essential given the data and insights you're going to be getting back and the changes you may need to make from that initial strategy to really fully get all the value out of that 1.9 trillion of investment that's being made in this space.
Yeah, I think that's a great point around agility too, because so many organizations really just think of agility in terms of speed, and I think you make some really good points there. What about on the accelerator side? I know you feel really strongly about just the importance of the leader's role in digital transformation. And as I said, that takes a lot of courage. What are your thoughts around courage and data acumen?
Sure. I'll start with data acumen. We are seeing the power of data every day in all parts of our business. Building a data-driven culture, a culture that can ask really good questions about what the data is showing, is essential. You will be getting more data back about systems, services, their performance than ever before, and having people who are oriented to looking at that data and driving decisions from it becomes essential. You can also greatly enhance the product or service you're offering with that data through what's happening with data science and machine learning and deep learning. We've been able to take literally millions of dollars of cost out by employing data science in our business and grow revenue substantially. It starts with people who are asking those great questions, and then getting people to feel enabled that they can take data, implement models, and connect them to those business processes to change how you're working. And you have to trust data to do that.
One of the things while we're on the data topic, I just want to mention is that, we're seeing a lot is like there's so much data, right, in organizations. We were recently working with a sales organization, and they had a dashboard. They called it a dashboard, but it had like so many different, metrics and, different pieces to it that the sales leaders were just confused by which ones they should really be focusing on that were going to have the biggest impact to their business. And so I think a lot of organizations are still trying to figure out what's the right level of data that's needed and how to focus on the right data.
Yeah, and this sort of leads you to the courage bubble. You don't necessarily know. The beauty of what's happening right now is the data and insights. The data is available to start driving insights across your organization. People can start looking at these KPIs. They can start discerning the ones that really are important. But the journey may start with a lot more dashboarding and a lot more inspection of your systems until you get it right. And you kind of have the courage to have that ambiguity exist, that uncertainty, and just encourage people to have the right behavior underneath it, which is ask the right questions, go look at the data, apply logic, constantly look to try to optimize outcomes, whatever cultural behaviors you have. At Pitney Bowes, we have a do the right thing the right way is sort of embodies us. So if we're using data to do the right thing the right way, that's a pretty good generic statement for what we're trying to do. And if you get the behaviors and the empowerment of people in place, they will sort out which of those measures are important. You won't be able to necessarily dictate all of this from the top.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks. Any other thoughts or comments around the digital culture piece?
I do love the courage bubble. It goes back to the idea that this is going to be hard. It'll probably take longer than you expect. It won't go exactly as planned or even close to plan. But if you create a team of people who are aligned to the mission and have that resilience to keep going and have the courage to act differently, you get through to the other side. It will happen. So I think it's a great part of the quality structure you've laid out here.
Yeah. Thanks. So if we think about the key drivers of digital transformation, I think, summarizing what we've talked about so far, we can see that, it's really important to align all of these levers. Leadership and is obviously critical right from the beginning, but leadership related to digital transformation shows up in a lot of different ways at all levels of the organization, which I think is really important to keep in mind. And it also requires behavior change, that we've talked about this whole new way of working differently. And so those two things really help to drive effective execution of your strategy and creating the type of culture that supports and enables digital transformation, which ultimately, impacts the results and the business bottom line. So a few takeaways that we can talk about just in ending our conversation today. Many of these we've mentioned throughout the discussion. The first one, obviously, the importance of alignment. Alignment not only at the senior leader level, but all throughout the organization, and kind of coming back and doing those checks that you talked about to ensure that alignment happens. And then also being sensitive to just all of the change that's going on across the organization. I think a lot of times when people start focusing on a particular, a big strategic imperative, it's easy to lose sight of all the other things that are happening. So that's always really critical to just continuously align and look at change across the organization and constantly make sure you're prioritizing and reprioritizing for people. Really taking a hard look at the culture, thinking about some of those culture qualities that we talked about. What are the organization's strengths? Where might they have some gaps or opportunities? And what do they really need to ensure is in place to support the digital strategy execution? The whole data piece, building and leveraging existing data, figuring out where new data might be needed, and what tools. And we find we go into organization, there's so many tools. It's not necessarily about introducing new tools, but really maximizing the use of ones that you have. And then the last piece there would be around, identifying for people what the behavior change is that needs to take place to work in a new way, and then holding people accountable for doing it. What do you think, James? Are there any others or any other words of wisdom you would have for organizations and leaders that are going through digital transformation?
I think maybe the ad I would have, or the piece of feedback I'd reinforce is you're creating a system that inherently is going to make you smarter if you take advantage of it. You're as you said, leadership and culture leading through to products and services, eventually creating new business results. All those business results happen with clients. So the faster you can get this path stood up, and the faster you can deliver on the first element of that transformation strategy and start taking feedback from it and use it to inform your next steps, and establish that you're an organization that is aware you're not going up front and aware that the plan will get adjusted, and build that into your structure, your management system, your approach. I think it creates an authenticity. It creates a real it creates a sense of achievement as you start to deliver value from these efforts, and it de-risks the program tremendously. So I think getting something, get something shipped, and then start pulling data back from it. It starts driving all of the right behavior that you want to have from a long-term hybrid organization.
Yeah, great point. Well, James, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your insights and learnings on the journey that you and the Pitney Bowes organization have been on. I mean, obviously from that data that we saw in the beginning, this digital transformation isn't going away anytime soon. So I think this is a topic we'll be talking about for a while. But I really do appreciate your time. And if anybody is listening that has any questions or comments or would like additional information, feel free to reach out to me on the contact information that is listed here. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Kim.